Stop scrolling. This is the story of a woman who refused to be defeated. From a childhood of fear and betrayal to facing life-threatening manipulations, she could have been destroyed. But she rose, reclaimed her voice, and built an empire. This is proof that no matter how dark your past, your future can shine brighter than you ever imagined. Watch her rise from nothing to unstoppable. Don't miss a single beat of the story. Hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like, share this with a friend, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your double dose of my 10 p.m. stories awaits you every single day at 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. Introduction: This is the story you'll never forget. A life built on secrets, betrayal, and unimaginable pain. From a childhood abandoned to a world full of lies and manipulation, one woman fought to reclaim herself. Every choice, every moment carries weight, suspense, and raw emotion. Welcome to my 10 p.m. stories, where human experiences are told like you've never heard before. Brace yourself, this journey is as shocking as it is real. My name is Benna, and today I stand as the 60-year-old CEO of one of Chicago's most successful digital marketing agencies. People look at me and see strength. They see polished suits, confident steps, a woman who has made it. They see the result, but they don't know the journey. They don't know the ashes I rose from. They don't know the silence I survived. And maybe that's why I'm finally telling this story. Because behind closed doors, when the city lights fade and my room grows quiet, I still hear the echoes of a childhood no one should ever live. I was born in the United States, that's all I know. No birth certificate. No family records. No clues. The earliest memory I have is of a small, rundown orphanage on the outskirts of a forgotten American village. I must have been a toddler when I arrived there, but the truth is, no one knows how I got there. I was simply found one morning, wrapped in a thin blanket, left at the back door like an unwanted package. I grew up believing I was invisible. The orphanage was no place for a child. It was a cracked building with peeling paint, creaky floors, and windows that whistled with cold air during winter nights. The staff was small, overworked, and rarely affectionate. And the older I grew, the more I realized something every child deserves: love, protection, safety didn't exist for me. Most of the children had parents who visited occasionally, dropping off gifts on weekends, bringing cakes on birthdays, holding them tightly before they left. I didn't have that. I didn't have anyone. I remember sitting by the fence every Sunday afternoon, watching families pick up their kids for day visits. Mothers wrapping scarves around little necks. Fathers lifting their children into their arms. Laughter. Warmth. Belonging. And I would sit there, pretending I was one of them. As a little girl, I didn't long for toys. I didn't dream of cakes or presents. I just wanted a pair of arms to hold me, a voice to call my name with love, a face to look up to and say, that one is mine. But the universe had other plans. It was around age 8 or 9 when the realization became unbearable. I wasn't just lonely, I was lost. A child whose beginning had no explanation. And every night, when I lay on my small squeaky bed, staring at the ceiling, the same questions burned in my heart. Who are my parents? Where are they? Why did they leave me? Was I unwanted? Unloved? A mistake? Those thoughts weren't just painful. They shaped every breath I took. But the worst part wasn't the absence of my parents, it was the darkness that lived inside that orphanage. The environment wasn't only lonely, it was dangerous. There were adults there who misused their authority, who made children fearful, silent, withdrawn. You could see it in the way kids flinched when certain footsteps approached. You could feel it in the tension that wrapped around the halls like barbed wire. No one talked about it. But we all knew. We all felt it. I don't talk about details and I never will, but what I will tell you is this: my childhood was stolen. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. And the worst part was the silence, the shame, the fear that if I ever spoke, no one would believe me. Or worse, something bad would happen to me. I learned to live inside myself, disconnected, quiet, emotionally bruised. And one night, after something happened that I could not forgive, not even at that young age, I made a decision. I was going to escape. I didn't care where I would go. I didn't care if I had to sleep on the streets. I didn't care if the world outside was colder than the world inside. I just knew one thing. Anything was better than staying. One early morning, a delivery van arrived to drop off supplies. The man unloading the boxes looked distracted, and no one was watching the back entrance. My heart raced so fast I could hear it in my ears. My hands shook. My breath caught in my throat. And before I could think twice, I ran out. I slipped inside the van, crawled behind crates and hid under a tarp. It was the first time in my life I had ever taken a risk. The first time I had chosen myself. As the van pulled away, I remember pressing my small hands against my mouth to stop myself from crying. I remember my little body trembling, half from fear, half from hope. I didn't know where the van was going. I didn't know what fate waited for me outside those orphanage walls. But I prayed, truly prayed, that maybe freedom could exist for someone like me. The ride felt endless. With every bump, with every turn, I wondered if the driver would find me and throw me out. Or worse, hand me back. But fate is unpredictable. Hours later, when the driver finally stopped the van and opened the back to unload the crates, he found me curled up in the corner, dirty, trembling, tears streaking down my cheeks. His face froze, a mixture of shock and annoyance. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. I couldn't speak. My voice disappeared the moment his eyes met mine. He asked more questions. I just stood there, shrinking into myself. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, paced around, muttered things. And for a brief second, I thought he might take me back. But he didn't. Instead, he drove for miles, talking to himself, confused, frustrated, overwhelmed by the responsibility of a runaway child who had nowhere to go. When he finally dropped me off at the side of a long, empty road, he left me with nothing but a bottle of water and $5 crumpled. No name, no destination, no safety, just a trembling 11-year-old girl, abandoned once again. And that moment, standing alone on that road, became the true beginning of my story. Because from that point on, I wasn't just an orphan. I was a drifter, a survivor, a child navigating a world far crueler than she ever imagined. And the road ahead was filled with shadows. But every shadow I walked through eventually led me to the light I never expected, and to the people who would one day become my true family. When the driver left me on that long, empty stretch of road, the silence around me felt heavier than the sky. The wind pressed against my thin clothes. My little hands gripped the bottle of water so tightly it hurt. I didn't know which direction to walk. I didn't know if I should scream or run, or curl up on the roadside and wait for someone, anyone, to save me. But no one came, so I walked until my feet blistered. Until the weight of the sky felt lighter than the weight inside my chest. Until hunger replaced fear, and fear replaced hunger again. I was only 11, maybe 12. A child the world didn't even know existed. Hours passed. Day turned into night. Cars rushed by, ignoring me the way people ignore a shadow. And with every step, I whispered inside myself, I must keep going. I must survive. I must find someplace safe. But the truth was, safety was a foreign word to me. I slept the first night under an abandoned bus stop, curling my body into a tight ball to keep warm. I remember staring at the streetlights flickering above me, praying they wouldn't go out. Darkness terrified me, not because of monsters but because I had already met them in human form. By the second day, I learned something heartbreaking. When you're a child wandering alone, people notice, but not always with kindness. Some looked at me with pity, some with suspicion, some with intentions I didn't have the language to describe back then. It didn't take long to realize I wasn't escaping danger. I was walking through a world filled with new ones. I learned to keep my eyes down, to hold my breaths when footsteps came too close, to run when my gut screamed at me. I also learned something else. Adults often ignored a child who pretended to have somewhere to go. So I walked with purpose, fast, focused, even when I had no destination. Days blurred into weeks. I drifted from small town to small town, sleeping in parks, bus shelters, abandoned sheds, anywhere that offered a roof or a corner to disappear into. I scavenged for food wherever I could, leftovers behind diners, small kindnesses from strangers, coins dropped on sidewalks. Hunger became a companion that never left my side. Cold became a familiar ache. Fear became the shadow that followed me everywhere. And then came the nights I never talk about. Nights when vulnerability made me a target. Nights when a child's desperation was exploited. Nights when I realized that running from one kind of darkness often meant stepping into another. I won't describe those moments, not because I have forgotten, but because some pain lives better in silence. But I will tell you this. Each time it happened, I died a little. And each time I woke up the next day determined to keep living. Not because I believed life had something beautiful for me, but because deep inside a tiny stubborn voice whispered, "Your story is not meant to end like this." That voice kept me alive. I don't know how long I wandered like that. Months. Maybe longer. Time becomes meaningless when every day is survival. Eventually, I reached a bigger town, the first place with tall buildings, buses, busy roads, and people who didn't stop to stare at a lonely child. For the first time, I blended into the chaos instead of standing out. And something inside me shifted. I wasn't safe far from it. But I wasn't trapped either. I found small ways to earn food, washing windows at gas stations, sweeping outside stores, carrying groceries. People gave me a few dollars, a sandwich, an old jacket. Every kindness felt like a miracle. Every coin gave me another day of life. And slowly, I rebuilt a tiny fragment of hope. That town became the first place where I learned something important. How to read people. How to sense danger before it reached me. How to run at the right moment. How to trust a very small number of faces. That I was still wounded. Still terrified. But now, I was learning to survive the world, not just escape it. A few months later, I was taken in by a temporary youth shelter, the first place that offered me structure, meals, and a bed that didn't smell of fear. The workers there didn't pry too much into my past. They didn't force me to explain. They saw the bruises behind my eyes, even if they couldn't see the ones on my heart. For a while, I finally breathed. But the shelter was temporary. After a few months, I aged out of their care options, and I was back on my own again. Except this time, I didn't run aimlessly. I decided to head toward a city, a big one where I could disappear into crowds, where I could find work under the table, where I could learn skills, where maybe, just maybe, life would eventually give me a chance. I didn't know which city to choose, but a bus driver I met at a station told me, "If you want to start over, go north. Big cities there give people second chances." So I went north. I hitchhiked when I could, walked when I had to, caught cheap buses when I had enough coins. And finally, after more miles than I could count, I reached Chicago. The city was loud, cold, overwhelming, but alive. And that was enough. I was a teenager by then, thin, quiet, carrying scars no one could see. I found odd jobs in diners, cleaning motels, stocking shelves in late-night stores. Each job lasted a few months before I moved again. I was always afraid someone would ask for documents, ask questions, wonder where I came from. But Chicago didn't care about your past. It cared about whether you could work hard. And work hard, I did. Little by little, I learned how the world functioned. I learned to count money, to read better, to write better, to speak confidently, to navigate buses and trains, to blend in with society. I was still broken, still scared, still searching for a sense of belonging. But I was becoming a person who could survive without shrinking. One day, I looked at a reflection of myself in a store window and realized something I'd never felt before. I'm still here. Despite the pain. Despite the trauma. Despite the world's cruelty. I was still here. Alive. Standing. Breathing. Growing. I didn't know it then, but I was slowly walking toward a destiny far bigger than survival. I was walking toward the moment when my entire life would change. The moment I would meet two people who would rewrite my idea of family forever. And that turning point would come when I turned 40. Stay with me, the story only gets darker. Hit like and keep watching. Before it's too late. By the time I reached my late 30s, I had become a woman shaped more by survival than by dreams. I still carried the same questions, the same wounds, the same hollowness, but I'd learned how to hide them beneath quiet strength. Chicago had become my home, although I never truly felt at home anywhere. I moved between rented rooms and cheap apartments, working whatever jobs paid enough to keep me afloat. I wasn't educated in the traditional sense, but life had trained me. I knew how to work harder than anyone, how to absorb skills like a sponge, and how to blend into the world without drawing attention. People said I was smart. People said I learned quickly. People said I had potential. But I couldn't see what they saw. When you spend your childhood believing you're nothing, it's hard to accept you could be anything at all. Still, something in me kept pushing forward. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was survival instinct. Maybe it was hope, a fragile kind, the kind that refuses to die even after everything. I worked at a small office supply store when my life changed forever. A man walked in one afternoon, tall, kind-eyed, dressed in a professional coat. He looked like someone who belonged in a different world than mine. He asked for something simple, but it was his voice that caught me off guard. Warm, gentle, patient. People like him didn't usually look at women like me with kindness. But he did. He noticed how efficiently I worked, how I helped a customer before helping him, how I organized the counter almost without thinking. And then out of nowhere he asked, "Do you work anywhere else?" I hesitated, unsure why a man like this would care. "No," I whispered. "You work like someone who deserves more," he said. "My name is Philip. I run a small IT consulting agency. I could use someone like you." I didn't know what he meant, someone like you. Those words usually meant pity. This time, they felt different. He handed me his card. "Come by tomorrow," he said, "if you're interested." I almost didn't go. A lifetime of fear makes you suspicious of kindness. But something in his voice stayed with me, a softness, a sincerity, a tone I had never heard from a man before, not toward me. So the next morning I stood outside his office door, my hands shaking. I almost turned back. Almost ran the way I'd been running my whole life. But then the door opened and there he was. "Benna," he said, smiling. "I hoped you'd come." It was the first time an adult had spoken my name as if it meant something. A new beginning. Mr. Philip didn't ask about my past. He didn't ask where I was from, who my parents were, or why I had no references. He didn't ask about the exhaustion in my eyes or the way I flinched when someone stood too close. He just trusted me. Something I had never been given before. He trained me patiently. Taught me how systems worked, how digital tools functioned, how websites were built, how marketing online could change a business. He didn't make me feel stupid for not knowing. He didn't rush me. He didn't treat me like I should already understand that I worked harder than I had ever worked at anything. Every day I arrived early and left late. Every night I read whatever manuals and guides I could find. Every week I grew more confident. It wasn't just a job. It was the first time in 40 years that I felt like I was becoming someone. A few months later, he introduced me to his wife, Mrs. Philip. Graceful, warm, gentle in a way that made me uncomfortable at first, simply because I didn't know how to receive gentleness. She welcomed me into her home as if I had always belonged there. "You're part of our team," she told me. Then with a soft smile, "which also makes you part of us." Part of us. I had never been part of anything before. They didn't have children, and I didn't have parents. Life has an unusual way of filling empty spaces. I found myself spending holidays with them. Dinners, weekends, birthdays. Moments I didn't realize I'd been missing until I had them. For the first time I was surrounded by warmth, not the dramatic, cinematic kind, but the small, everyday kind. A cup of tea waiting for me. A scarf handed to me on a cold day. A drive safe, whispered as I left the office. A person calling just to ask if I ate. These moments healed parts of me I didn't know were still bleeding. They encouraged me to date, to find love, to marry, but I couldn't. Not because I didn't want companionship, but because the past had carved out a fear in me too deep to erase. I had been hurt too many times. Used. Abused. Broken. How could I offer myself to someone when I couldn't even offer myself peace? So I politely refused. They didn't push me, but they never stopped hoping. Still, they never made me feel incomplete for choosing myself. And that alone made me love them more. Just when my life had started to feel stable, death came quietly. Mr. Philip didn't suffer long. A sudden medical emergency. A phone call in the middle of the afternoon. A hospital hallway. A doctor who couldn't meet my eyes. And just like that, the man who saved my life was gone. The weight of his absence crushed me. It crushed both of us, Mrs. Philip most of all. But in the middle of her grief, she held my hands and whispered, "He believed in you, Benna. And he wanted you to lead the company." I cried harder hearing that than I cried when he died. I wasn't ready. I wasn't educated. I wasn't trained to run a company. But he believed I was. So for him, I tried. I poured every hour, every breath, every drop of strength into his business. I learned everything I didn't know. I studied night after night. I faced board members who doubted me, clients who underestimated me, competitors who tried to break me. But with every challenge I remembered his voice. "You work like someone who deserves more." And slowly, I became a leader. Not by birth, not by education, not by privilege, but by resilience. Mrs. Philip stayed by my side through everything. She became my anchor. My family.my mother in every way that mattered. She filled the void I had carried since birth. And I filled the void she carried from never having children. Two broken hearts creating one whole. By the time I turned 50, I had transformed the small consulting agency into a rising digital marketing firm. By the time I turned 60, it became one of the top agencies in Chicago, with 200 employees and clients across the country. But behind every success, there was still a lingering ache. Every night before sleep settled over me, the same questions whispered through my mind. Who were my parents? Did they search for me? Were they gone? Or did they simply never want me? Even with love, even with success, even with a family I chose, those unanswered questions stayed like shadows in corners of my soul. But I kept going. Because that's what survivors do. We keep going even when we carry storms inside us. I wish I could tell you that the truth set me free. But the truth, it almost destroyed me, because once you know what someone is capable of, you can never unknow it. Once you see the monster behind the mask, you can never pretend it's just a shadow. And once I connected the final dots, I realized something terrifying, that I was never dealing with a wrong man. I was dealing with a man who had built his entire life on lies. And I had walked straight into the center of the storm. One afternoon, when the sun was too bright to match the heaviness in my chest, a message popped onto my phone. A number I didn't recognize. One sentence. You don't know who he really is. Call me. I froze. My stomach dropped because deep down, I already knew this message was the beginning of the end. I called. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. A woman answered. Her voice? Fragile. Like someone who had been holding in pain for too long. You're her, right? She whispered. His new one. My throat tightened. Who are you? I asked. She released a trembling breath. I'm the mother of his child. For a second, everything around me blurred. The room felt like it had no oxygen. My heart didn't beat, it slammed. He told me he didn't have kids, I whispered. She laughed, a sad laugh, a broken laugh. He tells everyone what they want to hear. He switches his life depending on who he's talking to. My voice cracked. How did you find me? He keeps his passwords simple. Checks other women from my account. Maybe he forgot to log out. Or maybe he wanted me to see you. He likes jealousy. It makes him feel powerful. My knees weak. My hands cold. My entire body trembling. He's not the man you think, she continued. He will make you feel special, worshipped, chosen, until he doesn't need you anymore. Then she said the sentence that cut through my soul. I just wanted to warn you before he destroys you the way he destroyed me. When the call ended, I sat in silence. Not crying. Not screaming. Just numb. That numbness people talk about right before they break. I scrolled through my memories, messages he sent, promises he made, the way he touched my face like I was art. And every piece twisted into a knife. It wasn't real. It was never real. I thought I had chosen him. But he had chosen me long before I ever said yes. Chosen me the way a hunter chooses prey. Every compliment, every sweet line, every moment that once felt like a breath of air. I didn't know I needed it all snapped into place. He never loved the real me. He loved what I gave him. Attention. Validation. A mirror he could admire himself in. I was never his partner. I was his supply. And without warning, my body collapsed into tears. It wasn't the heartbreak of losing someone. It was the grief of losing who I thought he was. Days passed in a blur. I didn't call him. Didn't text him. Didn't respond to any of his messages that grew angrier and more demanding. Until he appeared. In person. Standing at my door like he owned the place. Like he owned me, his smile calm. His eyes calculating. Why'd you disappear? He asked. Not are you okay? Not did I hurt you? Not talk to me. No, just, why did my toy stop working? I stared at him. And for the first time, I saw everything. The entitlement, the emptiness, the coldness behind the charm. You lied to me, I said quietly. He tilted his head. About what? Your child. The moment I said it, something flickered in his eyes. A flash of panic he tried to bury. He forced a laugh. She's lying. She's obsessed. She wants to ruin my life. She sounded broken, I said. He stepped closer. Too close. That's what women like her do. They play the victim. I swallowed my fear. What about women like me? He paused. Smirked. They're easier to replace. My chest tightened. My breath caught, and then he touched my face. The same gesture that once made me melt, but now, it made my spine turn to ice. His voice dropped to a whisper. Don't ever disappear on me again. And for the first time I understood. He wasn't here to explain, he wasn't here to apologize. He wasn't here because he cared, he was here because he thought he was losing control. That I stepped back. His hand fell away. No, I said. A small word. But heavy, sharp, final. His expression shifted instantly from charm to rage. What did she tell you? What exactly are you accusing me of? You're acting crazy. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. The words came like bullets. Rapid. Manipulative. Predictable. But something in me had finally snapped. I'm done, I whispered. You don't own me. You don't control me. You don't get to come here and intimidate me. He laughed again, but this time, cracked at the edges. You think you're better than the others? You think anyone will treat you like I did? His voice rose. The mask was falling apart. You'll come back, he said. You always come back. I stepped further inside, gripping the door. Watch me not. And I slammed it shut. His fist hit the door. Once. Twice. Hard enough to shake the frame. But I didn't open it, I didn't speak, I didn't move. Eventually, his footsteps faded. I sank to the floor, shaking. But for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Healing wasn't instant. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't linear. There were nights I questioned myself. Nights I replayed every moment, wondering how I didn't see it sooner. Nights I almost called him, not because I wanted him back, but because I wanted closure from someone who had no capacity to give it. But each day, the fog lifted a little. My voice came back. My worth returned. My strength rebuilt itself piece by piece. And once it did, I made a decision. A decision that would change everything. Not just for me, but for anyone who had ever been chosen by someone like him. I wasn't going to stay silent. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let fear write the ending of my story, because this wasn't a story about him anymore. This was a story about survival, awakening, reclaiming yourself from someone who tried to hollow you out. And now, I was ready to speak. Ready to expose everything. Ready for the truth to finally come out. People think the final chapter of a story like mine is revenge. Some dramatic moment where the villain falls to his knees and begs for forgiveness that never comes. But that's not real life. Real life is quieter. And somehow so much more powerful. Because the final chapter of my story wasn't about him losing. It was about me winning myself back. I didn't plan it. Healing never happens on a schedule. One night, I was sitting in my living room, lights off, just the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The kind of night where the world feels paused. Still. Like it's waiting. I opened my phone, not to check on him. Not to reread the messages, not to torture myself with memories, but to delete everything. Every photo. Every text. Every voicemail. My finger hovered for a moment. And then I hit erase all. The screen went blank. But something inside me lit up. A spark. Small. But real. And for the first time since everything happened, I took a long, slow breath. And it didn't hurt. Healing is strange. It comes in waves but also echoes. I kept hearing the woman's voice in my head, the one who called me, the mother of his child. I just wanted to warn you before he destroys you the way he destroyed me. Her pain had saved me. Even if her voice cracked through tears, even if she barely had the strength to speak. She used what she had left to protect another woman, and I realized something: if she hadn't spoken, I might still be in that nightmare. So I asked myself a question: if my voice could save someone else, would I be brave enough to use it? The answer terrified me. But it was yes. I didn't start with a speech. I didn't write a manifesto. I didn't plan to expose someone. I just told one person. A friend. Someone who knew something was wrong but didn't push. We sat on her porch steps in the cold, 2 mugs of coffee warming our hands. She looked at me with that gentle concern only real friends can give. I don't know what happened, she said softly, but you look like someone who survived something no one can see. And I broke. Tears I didn't know I still had. Pain I thought I buried. But this time, I wasn't breaking alone. When I finally finished telling her everything, she didn't judge me. She didn't blame me. She didn't say, "You should have known." She just wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You're safe now." And hearing those words, it was like someone opened a window inside my soul. Light could finally get in. People ask me sometimes, how could he do that? How could someone pretend so deeply? How could he live so many lies at once? And the truth is, he didn't pretend. That was who he was. A man who shapeshifted depending on the woman standing in front of him. A man who scattered little versions of himself across different lives. Like seeds of chaos. A man who lived without roots, without truth, without empathy. Someone who didn't feel love, he fed off it. Because once you understand that someone like him never truly belonged to you, you stop grieving the loss and start celebrating the escape. Months passed. The triggers softened. The memories blurred. His voice stopped echoing in my head. My life slowly came back to me. Piece by piece. Color by color. I filled my home with music again. I laughed without feeling guilty. I slept without checking my phone like a prisoner waiting for a command. And one morning I looked in the mirror and didn't see the damage anymore. I saw the rebirth. The strength. The woman who didn't break, she rebuilt. A version of me I had never met before. A version who walked differently. Spoke differently. Loved differently. A version who finally knew her worth. Just when I began living again, a message came through. Not from him, but from her, the woman who warned me. She wrote, "Thank you. He's gone now. Left the state. Moved on to a new city. Maybe a new victim. But I'm free too." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was sad, but because it reminded me of something powerful. Sometimes the people who hurt us don't get punished, they just move. But the people they tried to destroy, we rise. Not because of them, but in spite of them. And that is the greatest justice of all. If you're listening to this and you feel something heavy in your chest, if you're remembering someone who made you question your worth, someone who made you doubt your reality, someone who made you lose yourself piece by piece, then listen closely to the next words. You are not stupid. You are not weak. You are not to blame. People like him are skilled. They study you, mirror you, praise you, disarm you. Then they strip you down until you forget who you were. But there is one thing they always underestimate. The moment a woman wakes up. Because once she sees the truth, really sees it, she never returns to the cage she escaped from. And that's when she becomes unstoppable. My story doesn't end with justice, it doesn't end with revenge, doesn't even end with closure, it ends with freedom. With me waking up one morning, sunlight on my face, breathing like someone who finally remembered she has lungs. It ends with me looking at the world not through the eyes of a woman who was broken, but through the eyes of a woman who rebuilt herself from the ashes. It ends with me knowing I survived a man who wanted to hollow me out, and I came back fuller than ever. It ends with me standing taller, laughing louder, loving deeper, living brighter. It ends with me saying that this isn't the end. This is the beginning. The beginning of the life I was always meant to live. A life where no one gets to dim my light again. To every woman listening, if my story touched something inside you, if it woke up a truth you've been trying to ignore, then let this be your sign. Walk away. Heal yourself. Rebuild. Rise. Because one day you will look back and say, thank God I survived him. Thank God I found myself again. And when that day comes, you won't whisper it, you'll say it out loud, strong, unshakable, free. Just like I did. If this story touched you, stay with me for the next one. Tap subscribe, hit like, share it with someone who would feel it, and leave your thoughts in the comments. My 10 p.m. stories arrives every day at 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. so you're always caught up.